Hello, I'm Dr. Jim Morris.
And I'm Dr. Brenna Hassett.
And today, Brenna, I'm going to love this pun. We're going to get our teeth into...
Oh, thank you, Jim.
Yeah, dental biographies.
Ah, yes, because we are here with our friend and colleague, Dr. Allie Stewart.
Hello.
Hello,
Thanks for having
Allie.
me between your phones and in the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for coming and being in front of the bamboo.
Yes. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So, Ali, before we start, I need to work out actually what I'm going to call you, because I would call you an osteoarchaeologist, but maybe some of the people would call you a forensic anthropologist, or so kind of
Who am I today?
Who are you today?
Which hats am I wearing?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I would call myself currently a bioarchaeologist.
Okay.
Because I think research-wise and teaching-wise, that's what I'm aligning with most at the moment. Though I do have a background in forensic anthropology, and then I was brought up in Canada, where I have a very round anthropology, as you'll know, in terms of you do linguistics, you do social, but bones.
Bones.
Four-field approach.
Yes,
Four-field approach.
So we're talking
bioarchaeology.
So we're talking human bones.
We are.
Yeah, and everyone loves human bones.
Who doesn't?
Well, I mean, second best material.
There's always questions. Even if you're not a bone person, you always sort of go, you're just sort of drawn as being humans, aren't we, to knowing, you want to know a little bit maybe about when you see a skeleton in the news or something like that. You're a little bit drawn to it going, oh, what's that about? Even if it's a little bit... not for you. Questions.
We are kind of narcissists. I mean, that is the glorious thing about anthropology. It's the study of us.
Yeah.
And what is more us than the actual physical being of us? But Jim, you've failed to click on the most important part of any anthropologist's life, which is a particular type of anthropology that's very tooth-centered.
Okay.
Dr. Stewart is an expert in dental anthropology.
Yes, well... the skeleton itself, very, very important, but the teeth got a lot to say as well.
So why are the teeth so important? Well, I know teeth are important because you got to brush them. And
yes. Well, even if you don't, though, we get lots of plaque left over from archaeological ones, which are helpful, but I'm not saying nobody keep brushing your teeth.
So
floss twice.
Yeah, twice a day.
Unless you want archaeologists to get your plaque.
That's
because
true.
What can we do with plaque?
You can do a lot with plaque. I've not done anything with plaque, but you can do loads of stuff with plaque. You can sort of figure out what people are eating, ingested, the pollen that might be in there, things called phytoliths. Find them in the plaque.
So actually, if I went to the dentist and they told me off for not flossing, I'd be like, I'm actually just providing information. For
you're building your dental biography is what you're doing.
It's experimental archaeology.
Yeah.
And just because no one will sit in the same room with you or ever have conversation with you again doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Well, it might be a sacrifice I'm willing to make, but I don't think it's a sacrifice you'd be willing to.
It's why we have to invite guests on this podcast, because otherwise no one will speak to him.
But to answer your question, though, about why teeth are important, it's oftentimes when you've got, these are quite nice skeletons I've got behind me, but a lot of times in cemeteries with archaeological populations as well, the teeth are better preserved than the rest of the skeleton.
Oh, okay.
So if you can try and use them for something to tell you anything about the people that they belong to, then you're onto it. There's more of them in the mouth. There's 32, up to 32 in an adult, a normal adult. Children have got about 20, depending how old they are. So there's lots of them that you can use. They're well preserved, and if you can then get some data out of them, why not?
So that's interesting. So kind of preservation-wise, actually, teeth are the last thing to go. So even in a really poorly preserved burial, we're going to be able to get some information from the teeth. So what can teeth actually tell us, apart from plaque and the fact they didn't go to the dentist and things?
Yeah, so depends on terms of what kind of data you're getting with from the teeth. But in particular, what I've been using teeth for is looking at sort of the length and width, effectively, of them, the size overall of the tooth, to see if you can first identify any sort of genetic connections between people in these sort of skeletals, these cemeteries, effectively. Can you use teeth to figure out if people are related to one another biologically? And the reason that we can do that is because research has shown, there's been lots of studies, some cool stuff using twins and stuff like that to show that genetics is the main sort of driver in our overall tooth size. So the size of your teeth is dictated very much by the genetics that you've inherited from your parents. Your siblings will have similar sized teeth to you, is the premise. And therefore, if we can find individuals in cemeteries that share similarity in tooth size, you can start to infer and go, I think there might be a genetic connection here. Whether or not that relates to a social connection, that comes later.
But can't we just zap it with DNA and stuff and do
Yeah.
the science?
You can do.
DNA science
Absolutely.
thing.
Do you know
hard
how
science.
much DNA testing costs, Jim?
This
is. Let's think about archaeology
The
realistically.
thing is, so this is not, meant to be sort of replace DNA.
Okay.
DNA, when it works, amazing, robust technology that we got there. But if we can't get it, maybe it won't amplify because there's just been enough time, it's degraded. We can only get mitochondrial DNA, it's only half of the story. Like Brenna said, very expensive. So if you've got a skeletal assemblage of 600 individuals and you want to sample all of them, that's going to take a lot of, your research cost to do. Whereas if you've got a relatively quick, inexpensive way that you can shoot through all those 600 people, measure all their teeth, and then do some statistics to figure out,
Yay!
yeah, who's more likely to be related to who. At least that gives you a way to target your DNA testing then. So you can go, right, okay, from the 600, I think based on the tooth data that these 3 over here or this group over here, they might be genetically related based on this, then use that as your precursor to test these things. And we have done that for some early medieval, some Anglo-Saxon cemeteries, and luckily they've sort of matched up. So the tooth data has sort of matched up with the DNA. So it has helped to sort of reinforce this idea. So I'm not suggesting to do away with DNA. I think they can work quite well complementary.
I think that's a really nice example, actually, you've just shown of actually, because people always assume, we'll just do science, very hard science and stuff to solve things, but actually...
Stats are quite hard science. I mean, let's
Well,
not
yeah,
let
that's
anyone
true.
walk away with the idea that...
Yeah, that's true. But actually, that combining of kind of the DNA analysis with the dental biographies kind of means that we'll be able to get much more in-depth into cemeteries. So you're looking at familial connection, you're looking at kind of families.
Well,
in reality.
so like I said, the starting point is trying to figure out who might be genetically linked to who. But just because you share a biological connection to somebody does not a family make, effectively.
Okay.
So there's other ways that people can be in a family but not share any biological connection. I mean, the most obvious one to think about, if you think about people who marry together, marriage taboos, you're unlikely to share really close genetic connections, even in the past so much, with people
unless
who
you're
are...
an ancient Greek.
Well,
I think even they outmarried once in a
Yeah,
while.
I mean,
yeah, you've got to, diversify every now and again.
We've just lost the entire ancient Greek segment of our listeners.
Well, no, it's kind of, my apologies to anyone that
Yeah.
loves their ancient Greek myths.
But then there's other things,
But not
there's
cousin
a term called practical kin, wherein there's people who fill roles that you would expect family members to be, but they don't necessarily have to be. So, you could have, people who you consider a sister, or we would consider a sister, but they're not biologically related to you. They're just somebody that you share life experience with and all that. So
It's not like we don't have this in a modern concept, sort of brother from another mother.
Step
like-
siblings, step parents, adopted kin, adopted children, loads. Yeah.
I like that you can kind of investigate that kind of thing in the past, though, because one of the things we don't really understand is necessarily how people constructed their own families, how people constructed their own, what did it mean to be part of this group?
Yeah.
Who did you live with? Who
Well,
did you hate?
yeah.
Who did you like?
We've got to be very careful, haven't we? We've got to be careful with sort of ascribing our ideas of what a family is to people in the past who lived very different lives than us. Their communities might have been very different. So the work that I've been doing with these early medieval communities are quite small. They would have all known each other really well. Whereas, modern day, I live in a town that's quite big, and I don't really know many people outside of my immediate, say, street or something like that I wouldn't not necessarily call my neighbours my family, but you would maybe back in this context. So there are different ways to describe it. So we've got to be very careful when we are making assumptions or interpretations about what family is. We've really got to be led by the evidence rather than ascribing our own ideas about it.
But you've done some really, really cool things that I think kind of challenge what we think of as like, oh, well, this is the normal way that you would be in, you know, say this past period, that you would, for instance, your work here, and there is a picture up behind us of two skeletons. I'm referring here to one prone skeleton image. And Allie's primed me, so I kind of know this story. But it kind of challenged what I thought of in terms of like Anglo-Saxon, because we talked about Anglo-Saxon life last time.
We did.
What I thought of in terms of like, right, early medieval period, men and women going off on their life courses, leaving their villages, getting married. So what's going on with this person and their teeth?
Well, before I answer that, if I could just sort of lead a little bit into it,
Oh,
because I think it's important to note as well, and one of the things that I'm really interested in from a research perspective is actually telling the individual story of people. Because when you're talking about people, and if you start even talking about the males back in this population or the females, you're still looking at them as a collective. And I think that sort of traditionally, unless somebody was the king in the car park or somebody, you know, specific, you don't really find out a lot about an individual unless there's somebody really exciting to look at, you know, from a grave goods perspective or a burial context perspective. Whereas the majority of people in a community are not going to be that level of person. So I think their stories are really important to tell. And there's a lot of things that go into our everyday. It's quite tricky to pull out of the archaeological record. So things like we mentioned DNA already, or isotopes, you know, they can pick up on these really big changes in a person's life. So they can pick up on people who've moved from, you know, one continent to the next. You know, they were born one place, they died in another place. You know, you can track ancestry, or, you know, what's this ancestry makeup of this person that shows that people must have moved from places to get here. I think that's amazing. But again, on a really local or individual scale, there could be individuals who are moving, you know, 10 kilometers up the road for something, maybe back, you know, things like that. They're not sort of moving or having big changes happen in their life, but there's these small ones that still add to their story of who they are. And so the picture that we've got up here then are two female burials, two women, two separate graves. But I think through the teeth work that I've done, I've sort of told two different stories about how they might have come to be there buried. So they're both from the Oakington Early Medieval Cemetery, which you talked about in your last episode a little bit. We've got one woman over here, grave 80. She made the news. She did. She was buried with a cow.
So she was a king in a car park type of person.
Yeah. So very exciting there. So obviously people wanted to know who she was, and how she came to be there. I don't have all the answers for that, but I used her as a case study for some of my work because it's easy to start with the exciting and then move to the maybe less exciting.
I think we should point out what makes this grave so exciting. Should we ask our resident zoarch?
Oh,
What's going on in this grave?
Wow, I'm very glad that we've already moved on to zoarchaeology.
Get some animal bones.
So I should probably also describe it for people that are listening and not watching. So grave 80 is from Oakington, and what you've got is a human skeleton that's on their side, and by their head. The head is almost resting on the almost complete skeleton of a cow. And that cow is again on its side, and actually its feet are tied together from looks of it. So its kind of feet are there tied together. It's actually quite a messy grave. So it's quite a large kind of almost oval kind of cut that it's in there. And the woman's got grave goods with her. We're not going to talk about grave goods because we're all about bones today.
Yeah.
But she's got some grave goods with her.
She's quite decorated.
Yeah.
So obviously, understandably, people will want to know who is she to the community.
Why did she get a cow?
Why did she get a cow? I don't know why she got the cow.
Well, for the cow,
Spoiler alert.
That could be a whole other podcast in itself.
Why did the cow get a lady?
Why did the cow get a lady?
Oh.
But it's one of the only examples of someone being buried with a cow rather than a horse from the Anglo-Saxon time period. Now, why that is, I could go on for about 20 minutes, so I won't.
Well, I think we know what we're asking Jim about.
The archaeology of the cow.
Archaeology of the cow.
One specific cow.
But what's really interesting is it's an unusual burial. So actually, so it's a good one to actually look at because it's an unusual burial in terms of the grave good. So let's call the cow a grave good.
So what I did then when I started looking into who she might be, so I compared her teeth to the wider community to see which individuals she comes up as being most similar to. And what was interesting, so we sort of know from later period historical records and things like that, that the early medieval period was likely sort of patrilineal based, or they had patrilocal residence in terms of, it was like your father was, or the male lineage sort of stayed in one place and females moved around. So when I was looking at her teeth, they were coming up as most similar, not to the men in the community, but to other females, other women in the community they were most similar to, which, could be, mothers and daughters or something like that. Or it could be the two that were most similar to her, or the three others that were most similar to her, were also quite decorated females as well. So it might be something that she has moved to Oakington for marriage and she was integrated into this community, and they're showing the importance of that. Maybe she was the wife or the sister or something, or sister wife or something like that. I said I wasn't going to say that term, but I've said it now. And all sorts, or something affiliated in that sort of practical kin sense to some important, family or lineage in this community, which is why she's represented in this way, why she got the cow. Whereas this other grave here is quite interesting. So this is grave 57 to describe it. It's again sort of a female around 25-ish years old, and she was pregnant at the time of birth. So she was recovered with neonate bones, baby bones, in her hip area, her pelvis. And so I did the same for her in terms of looking at her teeth and who are they most similar to. And in this respect, it was the opposite. So her teeth were coming up as most similar to males in the group instead of females in the group, which again I thought was quite interesting. So could it be that she was born at Oakington, therefore showing this connection and biological connection to the males that still reside there? And then she's left Oakington. She's gone somewhere for marriage, which was a big thing, a big deal for a lady back in the early medieval times. And then she came back to her birthland, effectively her homeland, to give birth around her family, her kin, effectively, in that space. So could it be that? And there are some others who think that women might have travelled back to their homelands for birth. You want to be around the people. You want your support network, effectively.
So you don't want your mother-in-law there. You want
exactly.
your own mother there.
And speaking from experience, you definitely do not want to. Don't be watching this.
I think she'll forgive you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that really I liked so much about this kind of biography is because we often we were talking about it earlier, and we said basically archaeologists have this really bad habit of playing Risk with entire groups of people. Right, we've made up some countries that are different colours that we put on the map.
Move them around.
We've got little pieces and giant arrows where we're just moving genetics and possibly pots in various directions until someone owns Russia. But they don't call it Russia. And it's a really weird kind of habit of kind of looking at things, and it's the nature of our evidence, right?
Yeah.
We have evidence that talks about multiple generations, about thousands of years, hundreds of years. But to get to like an actual person, a person doesn't live over 1,000 years. That this person is not going to know what happened 500 years before in a village. You have to get really fine-grained stuff, and it's hard to get to that level of actually in this person's life. They might have moved several times. They might have experienced different family groups, different networks.
Yeah. And that's, I think, where tooth data or dental metric data could be helpful, because these really robust technologies like DNA and isotopes, they're fantastic at answering those larger scale questions, the bigger changes, the bigger distances. But like you're saying, it's quite difficult from those as they are now, sort of tools in your toolkit, to answer those really small scale questions, micromobility, why did, and neither of them also answer the question as to the why as well. So why was this woman moving elsewhere? Yeah, for marriage, but why was she moving back, and what was the reason? So part of what I'm also interested in going forward into the future is looking at stories like this, in terms of particularly the woman who might have moved back to Oakington for childbirth, understanding the social reasons why, and pulling some ethnographic or some information from even like midwives and things, asking people today why are you choosing to give birth, you've got your birth plan, why is it that effectively, and there probably is very similar reasons today that there were then. They want to be with people that they know. They want to have people around that have time to help raise the children. So maybe, you know, their mothers and their fathers who aren't as, you know, hands-on in other ways in the community now are maybe taking on that sort of village role for helping to raise children. They want to be in those sorts of environments. So there could be some parallels.
And is it, you know, I feel weird being the man asking this question, but is it a dangerous time as well, giving birth? So actually, we're talking, you know, here we're talking about early medieval period. They can't give you gas and air, and go, oh, hold on, let's go off to surgery if we need to.
Yeah.
So
there might be more recovery after it as well. So again, having people around you to help you through the birth process, which yes is not a walk in the park always. But then that time after, so if it was complicated or if something was happening, or, you know, either to the mother or the child, having more people around to take on that. We were actually talking about in a lecture with students the other day, actually, we were talking about this idea around like care, and you can't really see evidence of care in the archaeological record, but, you know, thinking about these social connections, people might have our ideas of family, coming back to that, who might actually be the ones to take on certain care roles in somebody's life. So if I needed care after a very vulnerable period of time, so giving birth and I was unwell, again, there's certain people that I would prefer to interact with in terms of, you know, can you help me get up? Can you help me get food? Can you help me get clean? Can you help me
have specific social bonds that sort of...
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that might link into the reasons why these women were choosing to move around for different things.
And I think it's really interesting because we do have other archaeological examples of specific places for care for pregnant people that we think are associated with, so they come from perhaps different periods, but for instance, there's the island of Astypalia in Greece, where there's ongoing excavations, which may well be essentially a shrine for women experiencing difficult births or who struggle during birth. And they have an excess number of neonate burials because, of course, and the same of Carthage.
Yeah.
People go hard on Carthage and tell them, you know, they're all baby eaters. There is a giant... Well, that was mostly the Romans. We know how they felt about Carthage. But, you know, there's this giant cemetery in Carthage that has lots and lots of infants, and people said, oh, you know, it's prostitutes burying babies they didn't want, or it's this Carthaginians with their baby sacrificing ways. That was all the Romans. Until, you know, people came along and actually looked to their teeth and said, a lot of these infants weren't actually born. They are probably, you know, in the same way of other cemeteries where there's lots of neonates, and they may reflect, this is where you came.
Yeah.
There were places where there were people who would try and help you, a temple or experts, midwives, you know, where you could actually travel to. So if you were having a difficult pregnancy, you might go home rather than stay with your mother-in-law, no matter how wonderful and nice she is.
Yes, exactly. You go back, and it's this idea of sort of shared knowledge as well. You know, you want to be with the people who maybe birthed you, because then they've maybe told you about these things. It's your sort of cultural education in a way. So again, feeling comfortable about going back to that.
So grave 57 is possibly showing a woman that's coming back to her original community.
Yeah, she's got some biological evidence that might suggest she's close to the males there. And if this community was patrilineal and sort of, or patrilocal residents, which other sources suggest it likely is, then that shows that sort of connection there. But then the fact that, you know, she's having a baby would suggest that she's not met her suitor there, shall we say, amongst her brothers.
Well,
and uncles, you know, she's gone elsewhere, and so potentially, yes, she's coming back.
And then grave 80,
Cow Lady.
Let's call her Cow Lady.
Yeah.
So the Cow Lady was linked much more with other women, but not with the men. So does that mean actually the people that she may be more closely related to are coming from a similar village or coming from a similar place?
Yeah. So again, these aren't isolated communities. We were talking about this before in terms of, you know, 10 kilometres. So this Oakington cemetery was 10 kilometres from another cemetery, again, that I was sort of studying called Hatherdean as part of this research project. 10 kilometres is not, you know, it's not a walk in the park necessarily. It could be a walk in some park, but it's not impossible to, you know, it's to not go there effectively. It's not, too far.
Jim regularly runs that distance up and down fells.
Yeah.
Well, yes. But I don't think fell running was a thing in the early medieval
I
period.
suspect it was, though. Don't you think?
I mean, you'd have to get from A to B.
I know some fell runners that'd be really excited if it kind of went back to...
We could do some experimental archaeology with local fell running clubs. Can we set that up?
Yeah, why not?
Oh,
yeah.
sounds great. But so I think it is possible that, that women were from a wider, geographical spread, but not too far away, were going in and out of these communities, so moving more between them. So the men were staying in Oakington and Hatherdean and wherever. And then the women were sort of going, right, okay, well, now's my time to go off. I'll head over and move here for marriage, or I'll move there for marriage. So it could be that from the woman here, the cow lady, the ones that she's similar to, then maybe they were, aunties or sisters or, things like that also at some point moved into the community.
I mean, that's really interesting because it kind of, when you think of that early medieval period, you're thinking of mass migration. That's kind of what the big news,
I'm
news
not,
headline
but,
is.
but archaeologists are.
Archaeologists might be, yeah.
With their risk game and their arrows
exactly,
on their back.
and their arrows of going, oh, look, here are the jutes and the angles, all moving across. But actually, on a personal scale, yes, you may have an ancestor who has done a big move, but then actually your world is actually maybe relatively small if you are just I'm going to do normal kind of
an average
everyday
for the listening audience. Jim is employing air quotes.
And again, it sort of links back to this. What I'm quite interested in is finding out about the average everyday, because whilst those big things can help shape cultural changes and shifts, the everyday practice also is going on. So, whilst these broader scale changes, you mentioned like the Jutes and the Saxons and all sorts is happening, and all that's happening, or the shift from Roman to post-Roman is happening. These people are still living. We always talk about, like, they wouldn't have woken up the day after the Romans fell in the UK and then gone, I'm no longer Roman, or something like that. So it's very much, they're aware of these longer term cultural changes, but the everyday lived experience of them is that, they still have to work in this community. They're still, people are entering their community, leaving their community, their community might be getting bigger, might be getting small, all these sorts of things, and trying to figure out a little bit more about what that is like. So how that plays out under the umbrella of these larger cultural changes, I think, is quite interesting to see.
I obviously think that all of your opinions are correct, and that dental anthropology is the best. But we do want to ask one of the most important questions. This is a question demanded of any practicing archaeologists, and you're in the lab, you're running the bone boot camp, you are teaching, you are in the forensic legal digging experiment, you're off with the police and doing things. But number one question, Dr. Allie Stewart, have you ever found any gold?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna. It's my turn to be a bit corny here and say, treasure is very much in the eye of the beholder, Brenna.
Oh.
So, what is your gold coin? It might be my, second premolar. So I think, I have found my gold. I found an area I'm interested in, and I found that students like it as well. So I think that's as much as I can ask for.
I don't think we can ask for a better answer. A second premolar sounds like gold to me. Well, thank you so much, Allie, for coming and talking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This has been the Archaeology of Dental Biographies.
Yay. Thank you.
Thanks. See you again next time.
I'd like to come back.
More teeth.
Thank you for listening to the Archaeology of. You can watch the show on our YouTube channel and on Spotify. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you'd be kind enough to leave us a review and rating, we would really appreciate that. See you in the next episode.